Back in 2010, I was driving from New Orleans, Los Angeles to Eugene, Oregon. It was just me, a 24-year-old female and my 2-year-old pit bull, in a 14-foot U-Haul truck with everything I owned crammed into the back, a fancy flip phone, and my printout of MapQuest directions. I think the first smartphones actually came out around that time, but I didn't have one. Cell phone service was also much spottier, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I hadn't seen a town or exit for a very long time, and my giant U-Haul was really low on gas. Just when I'm starting to freak out and seriously run out of gas, I see a small town coming up. I pull into this town and it is tiny. I was so worried about other things that I never did pay attention to the name of the town, but there were only about 6 streets in the whole place. I go gas up and am ready to get back on the road, except I cannot for the life of me find my way back to the highway. I circle the town about 4 times and start getting so frustrated because this is such a tiny town. How the hell can I not find my way out? I can literally see the highway but can't get to it. I returned to the gas station to ask for directions. Now, when I got gas, I paid at the pump and never went in. When I enter for directions, there's a skinny, nondescript guy who has black hair hanging down in front of his eyes that looks like it could use a good wash. He's not particularly creepy, but a little rude. He never really met my eyes. He was looking down at a magazine. He gives me directions that don't sound right at all. He's telling me to take a road that will get me to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment, I am dumbfounded. Then I point out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town. Why so far to get back to the highway? I can literally see it from the town. He is so casual, almost like I'm just an annoyance and can follow his directions or not. Why should he care? He gives me some explanation about the road curving around that doesn't really make sense. He still doesn't look at me. Just whatever. I gave you your directions and waved his hand in the direction of the door. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling violently, and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. I get into the truck, and as soon as I put the key into the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that, no matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. I didn't know what, but I knew right then and there that there was no way I was going to follow his directions. Yet this was the only store in this little town, and, short of knocking on doors, no thank you. There was no one else to ask for directions. I decided I didn't give a shit if this town seemed like something dropped out of the Twilight Zone. I was going to drive around until I found my own way out, even if it took all damn night. Then a big red beater of a pickup truck, as much rust as metal, pulls up and disgorged your typical Texas man, huge, husky, and in flannel and work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jumped out of the truck and approached him quickly yet warily. Looking into his eyes, I saw a kind human being, or at least I was hoping I did. I asked him if he could please give me directions to the highway. I told him I knew it was silly, but I just couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned as I was visibly upset, so he made me laugh and very cheerfully gave me directions for a hairpin turnoff, right at the end of a small concrete tunnel I had passed several times. He said it often confused travelers because it was so hard to see, they need to put up signs, etc. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles was it back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. Miles? Miss? I'd say it's a quarter mile at most. You can see the highway right from here. At this point, I couldn't help it. I had to know. What happens if I drive? And I gave him the directions the man in the store had given me. Texas looked at me very intently and asked me how I knew about that route. It was pretty far out and usually only locals know about it. So I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes and then asked what the attendant looked like and if I had a map of the state. Nope, just my MapQuest, which wasn't helpful in this situation. He goes to his truck and grabs a raggedy local map from his glove box. Spreading it out for me, he traces the route I describe. The way the man from the gas station had told me to go led away from town, away from the interstate, and led to seemingly the middle of nowhere. Texas told me that the road did go about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked him what was out there, and he told me that it was nothing but some junked cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics, and these were the nice things townspeople had to say about them. And the erstwhile clerk was part of this family and lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in Texas's eyes as he told me this. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts, and he told me to be careful traveling out here. I don't know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in the back of my U-Haul or what was in the driver's seat, but thankfully I didn't have to find out. Oh, and I learned that sometimes angels look like ruddy-haired Texans with scruffy faces and rusty pickups. Thank you, random Texas stranger. You really saved my ass, and I will always remember you with tons of love. Sorry I didn't ask your name. You're forever known as Texas to me now. This happened about 11 months ago when me and my wife got married in June. I'll never be so grateful that I have a habit of locking doors. Our wedding day was coming to an end. Family and friends were slowly starting to depart as me and my wife Diana took pictures and chatted with some of the guests who stayed a little longer and were just having a good time. It was a great day, and a lot of fond memories were made. But what was least expected is what happened that night as we were on our way to our honeymoon. As Diana and I said goodbye to the last of the guests, it was about 9 p.m. We got into the car and headed home. We had our bags packed prior to the wedding day for Cancun, and were ready to go. I live in Washington, and we were in a bit of a hurry, because instead of flying out from the Seattle airport in SeaTac like people normally do, it was a lot cheaper for us to drive up north to Canada and fly out from a Canadian airport. Also, me and my wife thought it would be fun to have a little road trip to Canada, and then fly out from Canada to Cancun. Plus, it was only a 3.5-hour drive for us and cheaper, so we headed out at about 12 a.m. We had a great time driving blasting music, talking about Cancun, and just being excited about the new chapter in our life. Diana slowly started to fall asleep, being exhausted from the wedding and whatnot. We were halfway to Canada. At this point, we were no longer in city area, but more a wooded area with fewer cars and fewer people the more we drove, practically seeing no one on the road. By that time, it was around 3 a.m. We had some extra time on our hands, and I was starting to fall asleep myself. So I pulled over to a gas station to get some Red Bull to keep me awake. I pulled into the gas station that was completely empty and parked the car to see Diana asleep. I told her I'm taking the keys and locking her inside, and that I'd be right back. Not sure if she could hear me, but she kind of motioned her hand around like people normally do when they're too tired to care. I came back around 6 minutes later to find my wife shaking and crying. I was confused and freaking out a bit because I wasn't sure why she was crying. She couldn't even get words out at first. Later, once she calmed down, she told me this. Apparently she did hear me when I told her I'd take the keys and be right back. And as she was sleeping, she was awoken by a tapping on the driver's side window. Being too tired to get up or even open her eyes, she lazily went for the unlock button on the passenger side of the door. As she was going for it, she froze. A thought passed her mind. Then she remembered. Didn't he say he had the keys? Why would he need me to unlock the door for him? That's when she heard a woman's voice mumbling from the driver's side. "Wake up." She turned herself around to look at the window and saw a woman. Long black hair with wide eyes and a crooked smile on her face. She couldn't hear what she was saying at first, but then she heard it. She kept repeating in a mumbled tone.
"Are you tired? Are you tired?"
She freaked out and told the woman to leave her alone. The woman laughed and told my wife that she was tired too. The woman never took her eyes off her and tried the door handle. At this point, my wife was close to tears and attempted to call me, but as she did, she heard what sounded like a phone buzz and realized I left my phone in the car. Out of options, my wife started to honk the horn and trying to scare off the woman, while also maybe getting my attention. The woman still had her gaze on her and started mumbling more while laughing and trying the door handle again. Then she mentioned something about someone named Sarah and asked my wife if she knew her. After a few more minutes of mumbling, she left. To my wife's words, the minute she left, I came out of the gas station. So my wife broke down. I don't know how I didn't hear the honking, and I still feel bad for leaving my phone in the car. My wife also added that one of the creepier things about that woman is she didn't look homeless or dirty or anything. In fact, she seemed normal and well kept. My wife said she'll never forget the woman's wide eyes and the gaze she had on her with that smile. It also chills me to think what would have happened if my wife never realized that I had the keys, or if she never heard me about locking her inside and opened the door while faced the other way. I don't know what the woman's intentions were, but if I couldn't hear the honk of a horn, I'm not sure I'd hear screams. To this day, I'm thankful I have a good habit of locking doors, and I'd recommend it no matter how long you're going to be gone. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the town as Sarah and I loaded our bags into the trunk of my Mustang. I couldn't contain my excitement as I double-checked the map, my heart racing with anticipation. Sarah stood beside me, her eyes fixed on the open road ahead, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Ready for this?" I asked, my voice betraying my excitement. Sarah nodded, her gaze alight with adventure. "More than ready." With a final glance at our modest suburban home, we climbed into the car and set off, the engine roaring to life beneath us. As we pulled onto the highway, a sense of freedom washed over us, the familiar sights and sounds of our everyday lives fading into the distance. The landscape changed gradually as we drove, morphing from bustling city streets to rolling hills and open plains. I pointed out landmarks along the way, my enthusiasm contagious as we laughed and joked, the miles slipping away beneath the wheels of the Mustang. Our first stop was a roadside diner, nestled on the outskirts of a small town, its neon sign flickering invitingly in the fading light. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of frying bacon and sizzling burgers, the sound of chatter and laughter filling the cozy space. We settled into a booth by the window, the worn vinyl seats creaking beneath us as we perused the menu. Sarah ordered a classic cheeseburger with fries, while I opted for the house specialty, a towering stack of pancakes smothered in syrup. As we waited for our food to arrive, we chatted with the waitress, a friendly woman with a warm smile and a twinkle in her eye. She regaled us with stories of life on the road, of adventures had and lessons learned, her words painting a vivid picture of the world beyond the diner's walls. When our food finally arrived, we dug in with gusto, the taste of grease and sugar, a welcome indulgence after hours on the road. Between mouthfuls, we shared our own stories, the hopes and dreams that had brought us to this point, the fears and uncertainties that still lingered in the back of our minds. As night fell, we reluctantly left the warmth of the diner behind, the chill of the evening air sending shivers down our spines. But we pressed on, guided by the promise of adventure and the lure of the unknown. The road stretched out before us, dark and winding, the headlights of the Mustang cutting through the darkness like a beacon in the night. We drove in silence for a time, lost in our own thoughts as the world outside blurred into a blur of shadows and shapes. But as we neared a deserted stretch of highway, a sense of unease settled over us. Sarah's grip tightened on the armrest, her knuckles turning white with tension, as I pressed harder on the gas pedal, the engine roaring to life beneath us. We rounded a bend in the road, and there it was, a looming silhouette against the moonlit sky, an abandoned hotel standing silent and still in the night. Sarah and I have always liked exploring abandoned buildings, and this seemed like too good of an opportunity to just drive past. I pulled the car to a stop, the headlights illuminating the crumbling facade. "What do you think? Should we go in?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah shook her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I don't know, Jake. It's like something out of a horror movie." But despite our reservations, we found ourselves drawn to the hotel, the pull of curiosity stronger than our fear. With a shared glance and a silent nod, we climbed out of the car and approached the building, our footsteps echoing in the empty silence of the night. As we stepped through the shattered doorway, we were met with a wave of musty air and decay, the smell of rot and neglect hanging heavy in the air. We moved cautiously through the dimly lit corridors, our senses on high alert as we searched for signs of life. But the hotel was empty, the rooms long abandoned and forgotten, their contents lost to time and decay. And yet, as we explored further, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that we were not alone in this derelict place. Suddenly, a noise shattered the silence, a creaking floorboard, a rustling in the shadows, and we froze, our hearts pounding in our chests as we searched frantically for the source. Our hearts pounding in our chests as we searched frantically for the source. Then we saw him, a man standing in the middle of the room. He was just standing there, watching us. I didn't know what to do. Sarah and I were frozen. But when I noticed the knife in his hand, I whispered to Sarah to run. Without hesitation, we turned and ran. Adrenaline surged through my veins as we raced towards the exit. His footsteps followed right behind us. What this guy did next still gives me nightmares. He started laughing. What type of psychopath laughs as he chases two strangers with a fucking knife? I felt like at any second I was going to feel his knife pierce through my back. After what felt like an eternity, we finally burst through the shattered doorway and into the cool night air, our hearts pounding in our chests as we sprinted towards the safety of my Mustang. We didn't look back, didn't stop running until we were safely inside the car, the engine roaring to life beneath us as we sped away into the night. We stopped down the road far enough away so there was no way anyone could have followed us on foot. I called the police and explained what just happened. The operator told me she would send a patrol car to check it out. I called them back later that night and they told me 2 officers entered the building and found the guy still holding the knife. They demanded him to drop it, but instead he lunged toward them, knife in hand. Luckily, they were able to taser him, and he was arrested before anything bad could happen. This story happened in 2009. I was driving late at night on I-90 between Deer Lodge and Missoula, MT. I'm originally from Seattle. I was driving back to Seattle after visiting family in Bozeman and Billings. The stretch of freeway between Deer Lodge and Missoula has some weird small mountain towns along the side, occasionally interrupted by large truck stops. Anyway, it's about 11:30 at night, and I'm on my way to my hotel in Missoula when I notice that I need to get some gas for my car. I stop off in this random small town with one gas station with a 24-hour pump. It had a convenience store attached to it, but it was closed. I get this really weird vibe from the station as soon as I pulled up to the pump. I had just put it in park, and the engine was still running. I was about to shut off my car when out of the corner of my eye, I see some dark figure come from the side of the closed convenience store and start running towards my car. Some instinct in my head kicked in, and I put my car back into drive and got the hell out of there. I look back in my rearview mirror to see the figure chasing after my car for a few seconds. By that time, I make the turn that gets me back onto the freeway. I found a brightly lit truck stop about 10 miles down the road where I filled up my car. Needless to say, that weirded me the hell out for the rest of my drive to Missoula and Seattle. I've heard it before and I experienced it that night. Strange things happen in the mountains.